Hello, everybody. Let me get my volume up a little. It's been a while since we've had one of these. I saw the last one we did was in August. So I know you're all here just for the sus Edgar Allan Poe. Just in time, ejaculated Frankie. Welcome, Mininochi. I appreciate the light goal, but because this is a bit of a different stream, I will pin TJ's message. I appreciate it, though. I did not refill my water before I started. Oh boy. All right. So, as the rules say, it's just going to be a reading stream. I might not be able to respond to every comment. We'll see what Edgar Allan Poe has in store for us today. I intended to every person on the planet will love me. I had intended to do more research on the French today, and then I immediately passed out at like 2 o'clock and didn't wake up until like 5:30. So we're just gonna have to fumble our way through the French again. I'll do my best not to be insulting to the language or the people. I don't speak French. Welcome in Reeb, welcome in Frankie, Inochi, TJ, Conway, thank you for the like, and Charta Darby. The time to do the thing every time the word ejaculate is said. I don't remember seeing it, to be honest, but let's begin. All right, is it still picking me up? It is. Good, good, good. Actually, I need to bring this light a little closer. That's not good at all. There we go. My light did a little dance. I don't want it to break. Whew. I almost forget how to do one of these. It's been so long. All right. The name of this one is Bonbon. Clearly there will be much French. That Pierre Bonbon was a restaurateur of uncommon qualifications, no man who, during the reign of, we're already starting with a blank, frequented the little cafe in the cul-de-sac Le Fab in Rouen, will, I imagine, feel himself at liberty to dispute. That Pierre Bonbon was, in an equal degree, skilled in the philosophy of that period is, I presume, still more especially undeniable. His pater la foi were beyond doubt immaculate, but what pen can do justice to his essays sur la nature, his thoughts sur de l'âme, his observations sur l'esprit? If his omelettes, if his fricandeau dough were inestimable, what literature of that day would not have given twice as much for an idée de bonbon as for all the trash of idée of all the rest of the savants? Bonbon had ransacked libraries which no man had ransacked, read more than any other would have entertained a notion of reading, had understood more than any other would have conceived the possibility of understanding, and although, while he flourished, there were not wanting some authors at Rouen to assert that his dicta evinced neither the purity of the academy nor the depths of the lyceum. Although, mark me, his doctrines were by no means very generally comprehended, still it did not follow that they were difficult of comprehension. It was, I think, on account of their self-evidency that many persons were led to consider them abstruse. It is to Bonbon, but let this go no further, it is to Bonbon that Kant himself is mainly indebted for his metaphysics. The former was indeed not a Platonist, nor strictly speaking an Aristotelian, nor did he, like the modern Leibniz, waste those precious hours which might be employed in the invention of a fricassee or a facile grandeur, the analysis of a sensation in which frivolous attempts at reconciling the obstinate oils and waters of ethical discussion. Not at all. Bonbon was ionic. Bonbon was equally italic. He reasoned a priori. He reasoned a posteriori. His ideas were innate or otherwise. He believed in George of Trebizond. He believed in Bossarian. Bonbon was emphatically a bonbonist. I have spoken of the philosopher in his capacity of restaurateur. I would not, however, have any friend of mine imagine that, in fulfilling his hereditary duties in that line, our hero wanted a proper estimation of their dignity and importance. Far from it. It was impossible to say in which branch of his profession he took the greater pride. In his opinion, the powers of the intellect held intimate connection with the capabilities of the stomach. I'm not sure, indeed, that he had greatly disagreed with the Chinese, who hold that the soul lies in the abdomen. The Greeks, at all events, were right, he thought, who employed the same word for the mind and the diaphragm. By this I do not mean to insinuate a charge of gluttony, or indeed any other serious charge to the prejudice of the metaphysician. If Pierre Bonbon had his failings, and what great man has not 1,000? If Pierre Bonbon, I say, had his failings, they were failings of very little importance. Faults, indeed, which, in other tempers, have often been looked upon rather in the light of virtues. As regards one of these foibles, I should not have even mentioned it in this history but for the remarkable prominency, the extreme alto relievo, in which it jutted out from the plane of his general disposition. He could never let slip an opportunity of making a bargain. Not that he was avaricious, no. It was by no means necessary to the satisfaction of the philosopher that the bargain should be to his own proper advantage. Provided a trade could be effected, a trade of any kind, upon any terms, or under any circumstances. A triumphant smile was seen for many days thereafter to enlighten his countenance, and a knowing wink of the eye to give evidence of his sagacity. At any epoch, it would have been very wonderful if a humor so peculiar as the one I have just mentioned should elicit attention and remark. At the epoch of our narrative, had this peculiarity not attracted observation, there would have been room for wonder indeed. It was soon reported that, upon all occasions of the kind, the smile of Bonbon was wont to differ widely from the downright grin with which he would laugh at his own jokes or welcome an acquaintance. Hints were thrown out of an exciting nature. Stories were told of perilous bargains made in a hurry and repented of at leisure. My apologies for Sir Doggo. And instances were adduced of unaccountable capacities, vague longings, and unnatural inclinations implanted by the author of all evil for wise purpose of his own. The philosopher had other weaknesses, but they are scarcely worthy our serious examination. For example, there are few men of extraordinary profundity which are found wanting in an inclination for the bottle. Whether this inclination be an exciting cause, or rather a valid proof of such profundity, it is a nice thing to say. Bonbon, as far as I can learn, did not think the subject adapted to minute investigation. Nor do I. Yet in the indulgence of a propensity so truly classical, it is not to be supposed that the restaurateur would lose sight of that intuitive discrimination which was wont to characterize at one and the same time his essai and his omelettes. In his seclusions, the vin de Bourgogne had its allotted hour, and there were appropriate moments for the Côte du Rhône. With him, Saturn was to Medoc what Catullus was to Homer. He would sport with a syllogism in sipping Saint Péray, but unravel an argument over Clos de Vauquot, and upset a theory in a torrent of Chambertin. Well, had it been the same quick sense of propriety that had attended him in peddling propensity, to which I have formerly alluded, but this was by no means the case. Indeed, to say the truth, that trait of mind in the philosophic Bonbon did begin at length to assume a character of strange intensity and mysticism, and appeared deeply tinctured with the diablerie of his favorite German studies. To enter the little café in the cul-de-sac, Le Fauve was, at the period of our tale, to enter the sanctum of a man of genius. Bonbon was a man of genius. There was not a sous cuisinier in Rouen who could not have told you that Bonbon was a man of genius. His very cat knew it, and forbade to whisk her tail in the presence of a man of genius. His large water dog was acquainted with the fact, and upon the approach of his master betrayed his sense of inferiority by a sanctity of deportment, a debasement of the ears, and a dropping of the lower jaw, not altogether unworthy of a dog. It is, however, true that much of this habitual respect might have been attributed to the personal appearance of the metaphysician. A distinguished exterior will, I am constrained to say, have its weight even with a beast, and I am willing to allow much in the outward man of the restaurateur calculated to impress the imagination of the quadruped. There is a peculiar majesty at the atmosphere of the little grate, if I may be permitted to be so equivocal an expression, which mere physical bulk alone will be found at all times inefficient in creating. If, however, Bon Bon was barely 3 feet in height, and if his head was diminutively small, still it was impossible to behold the rotundity of his stomach without a sense of magnificence nearly bordering upon the sublime. In its size, both dogs and men must have seen a type of his acquirements, in its immensity, a fitting habitation for his immortal soul. That is... Anyway. I might here, if it so pleased me, dilate upon the matter of habiliment, and other mere circumstances of the external metaphysician. I might hint that the hair of our hero was worn short, combed smoothly over his forehead, and surmounted by a conical-shaped white flannel cap and tassels. That his pea-green jerkin was not after the fashion of those worn by the common class of restaurateurs of the day, that the sleeves of something fuller than the reigning costume permitted, that the cuffs were turned up, not as usual in that barbarous period with cloth of the same quality and color as the garment, but faced in a more fanciful manner with the party-colored velvet of Genoa, that his slippers were of a bright purple, curiously filigreed, and might have been manufactured in Japan but for the exquisite pointing of the toes, and the brilliant tints of the binding and embroidery, that his breeches were of the yellow satin-like material called aimable, that his sky-blue cloak, resembling in form a dressing wrapper, and richly bestudded all over with crimson devices, floated cavalierly upon his shoulders like a mist of the morning, and that his tout ensemble gave rise to the remarkable words of Benevenuta, the improvisatrice of Florence, that it was difficult to say whether Pierre Bon Bon was indeed a bird of paradise, or rather a very paradise of perfection. I might, I say, expatiate upon all these points if I please, but I forbear. Merely personal details may be left to historical novelists. They are beneath the moral dignity of matter of fact. He sure does love to ramble, doesn't he? I have said that to enter the café in the cul-de-sac, Lefebvre was to enter the sanctum of a man of genius. But then it was the only man of genius who could duly estimate the merits of the sanctum. A sign consisting of a vast folio swung before the entrance. On one side of the volume was painted a bottle, on the reverse a pâté. On the back were visible in large letters the word Hors des bonbons. Thus was delicately shadowed forth the twofold occupation of the proprietor. Upon stepping over the threshold, the interior of the building presented itself to view. A long, low-pitched room of antique construction was indeed all the accommodation afforded by the café. In a corner of the apartment stood the bed of the metaphysician. An array of curtains, together with a canopy à la grecque, gave it an air all at once classical and comfortable. In the corner diagonally opposite appeared, in direct family communion, the properties of the kitchen and the bibliothèque. A dish of polemics stood peacefully upon the dresser. Here lay an oven full of the latest ethics. There a kettle of Judiciamo Melange. Volumes of German morality were hand in glove with the gridiron. A toasting fork might have been discovered by the side of the Eusebius. Plato reclined in his ease at the frying pan, and contemporary manuscripts were filed away upon the spit. In other respects, the Café des Bonbons might be said to differ little from the usual restaurants of the period. A large fireplace yawned opposite the door. On the right of the fireplace, an open cupboard displayed a formidable array of labeled bottles. It was here, about 12 o'clock one night, during the severe winter of blank, that Pierre Bon Bon, after having listened to some time to the comments of his neighbors upon his singular propensity, that Pierre Bon Bon, I say, having turned them all out of his house, locked the door upon them with an oath, and betook himself in no very pacific mood to the comforts of a leather-bottomed armchair and a fire of blazing sticks. It uses a very outdated word that is very offensive, and I believe it stands for the word sticks in previous times. I will not be saying that word. It was one of those terrific nights which are only met with once or twice during a century. It snowed fiercely, and the house tottered to its center with the floods of wind that, rushing through the crannies in the wall and pouring impetuously down the chimney, shook awfully the curtains of the philosopher's bed and disorganized the economy of his pâté pans and papers. Yes, thank you. That is exactly the word. The huge folio sign that swung without, exposed to the fury of the tempest, creaked ominously and gave out a moaning sound from the stanchions of solid oak. It was in no placid temper, I say, that the metaphysician drew up his chair to its customary station by the hearth. Many circumstances of a perplexing nature had occurred during the day to disturb the serenity of his meditations. In attempting de ouf à la princesse, he had unfortunately perpetrated an omelette à la reine. The discovery of a principle in ethics had been frustrated by the overturning of a stew, and last not least, he had been thwarted in one of those admirable bargains which he at all times took with especial delight in bringing to a successful termination. But in the chafing of his mind at these unaccountable vicissitudes, there did not fail to be mingled some degree of that nervous anxiety which the fury of a boisterous night is so well calculated to produce. Whistling to his more immediate vicinity the large black water dog we have spoken of before, and settling himself uneasily in his chair, he could not help casting a wary and unquiet eye towards those distant recesses of the apartment, whose inexorable shadows had not even the red firelight itself could more than partially succeed in overcoming. Having completed a scrutiny whose exact purpose was perhaps unintelligible to himself, he drew close to his seat a small table covered in books and papers, and soon became absorbed in the task of retouching a voluminous manuscript intended for publication on the morrow. He had been thus occupied for some minutes when, "I am in no hurry, Monsieur Bonbon," suddenly whispered a whining voice in the apartment. "The devil!" ejaculated our hero, starting to his feet, overturning the table at his side and staring around him in astonishment. "Very true," calmly replied the voice. "Very true. What is very true? How came you here?" vociferated the metaphysician as his eye fell upon something which lay stretched at full length upon the bed. "I was saying," said the intruder, without attending to the interrogatives, "I was saying that I am not at all pushed for time, that the business upon which I took the liberty of calling is of no pressing importance. In short, that I can very well wait until you have finished your exposition." "My exposition? There now, how came you to understand that I was writing an exposition? Good God!" "Hush!" replied the figure in shrill undertone, and arising quickly from the bed, made a single step towards our hero, while an iron lamp that descended overhead swung convulsively back from his approach. The philosopher's amazement did not prevent a narrow scrutiny of the stranger's dress and appearance. This thing is not picking me up at all. Hold up. Okay. Can you, yes, I think it can see me now. The outlines of his figure, exceedingly lean, but much above the common height, were rendered minutely distinct by means of a faded suit of black cloth which fitted tight to the skin, but was otherwise very much in the style of a century ago. These garments had evidently been intended for a much shorter person than their present owner. His ankles and wrists were left naked for several inches. In his shoes, however, a pair of very brilliant buckles gave the lie to the extreme poverty implied by the other portions of his dress. His head was bare and entirely bald, with the exception of the hinder part, from which descended a queue of considerable length. A pair of green spectacles with side glasses protected his eyes from the influence of the light, and at the same time prevented our hero from ascertaining either their color or their conformation. About the entire person there was no evidence of a shirt, but a white cravat, of filthy appearance, was tied with extreme precision around the throat, and the ends hanging down formally side by side gave, although I dare say unintentionally, the idea of an ecclesiastic. Indeed, many other points, both in his appearance and demeanor, might have very well sustained a conception of that nature. Over his left ear he carried, after the fashion of a modern clerk, an instrument resembling the stylus of the ancients. In his breast pocket of his coat appeared conspicuously a small black volume fastened with clasps of steel. This book, whether accidentally or not, was turned outwardly from the person as to discover the words Ritual Catholique in white letters upon the back. His entire physiognomy was interestingly saturnine, even cadaverously pale. The forehead was lofty and deeply furrowed with the ridges of contemplation. The corners of the mouth were drawn into an expression of the most submissive humility. There was also a clasping of the hands as he stepped towards our hero, a deep sigh, and altogether a look of such utter sanctity as could not have failed to be unequivocally prepossessing. Every shadow of anger faded from the countenance of the metaphysician as, having completed a satisfactory survey of his visitor's person, he shook him cordially by the hand and conducted him to a seat. There would, however, be a radical error in attributing this instantaneously transition of feeling in the philosopher to any one of those causes which might naturally be supposed to have had an influence. Indeed, Pierre Bonbon, from what I have been able to understand of his disposition, was of all men the least likely to be imposed upon by any speciousness of exterior deportment. It was impossible that so accurate an observer of men and things should have failed to consider upon the moment the real character of the personage who was thus intruded upon his hospitality. To say no more, the conformation of his visitor's feet was sufficiently remarkable. He maintained lightly upon his head an inordinately tall hat. There was a tremulous swelling around the hinder part of his breeches, and the vibration of his tailcoat was a palpable fact. Judge then what feelings of satisfaction our hero found himself thrown thus at once into the society of a person for whom he had at all times entertained the most unqualified respect. He was, however, too much of the diplomatist to let escape him any imitation of his suspicions in regard to the true state of affairs. It was not his cue to appear at all conscious of the high honor he had thus unexpectedly enjoyed, but by leading his guest into conversation to elicit some important ethical ideas which might, in obtaining a place in his contemplated publication, enlighten the human race and at the same time immortalize himself. Ideas which, I should have added, his visitor's great age and well-known proficiency in the science of morals might very well have enabled him to afford. Actuated by those enlightened views, our hero bade the gentleman sit down while he took himself the occasion to throw some sticks upon the fire and place upon the now re-established table some bottles of Mousseux. Having quickly completed these operations, he drew his chair vis-a-vis to his companions and waited until the latter should open the conversation. But plans even the most skillfully matured are often thwarted in the outset of their application, and the restaurateur found himself nonplussed by the very first words of his visitor's speech. "I see you know me, Bonbon," said he. And the devil, dropping at once the sanctity of his demeanor, opened to the fullest extent a mouth from ear to ear, so as to display a set of jagged and fang-like teeth. And throwing back his head, laughed long, loudly, wickedly, and uproarious, while the black dog, crouching down upon his haunches, joined lustily in the chorus, and the tabby cat, flying off at a tangent, stood up on end and shrieked in the furthest corner of the apartment. Not so the philosopher. He was too much of a man of the world either to laugh like the dog or by shrieks to betray the indecorous trepidation of the cat. It must be confessed he felt a little astonishment to see the white letters which form the words Ritual Catholique on the book in his guest's pockets, momentarily changing both their color and their import, and in a few seconds, in place of the original title, the words Registre de Condamns blazed forth at characters of red. The startling circumstance when Bonbon replied to his visitor's remark imparted to his manner an air of embarrassment which probably might not otherwise have been observed. "Why, sir," said the philosopher, "why, sir, to speak sincerely, I believe you are, upon my word, the damnedest It says D-dest. That is to say, I imagine, I have some very faint idea of the remarkable honor. Oh, yes, very well, interrupted His Majesty. Say no more, I see how it is. And hereupon, taking off his green spectacles, he wiped the glasses carefully with the sleeve of his coat and deposited them into his pocket. If Bonbon had been astonished by the incident of the book, his amazement was now much increased by the spectacle which here presented itself to view. In raising his eyes with a strong feeling of curiosity to ascertain the color of his guests, he found them by no means black as he had anticipated, nor gray as he might have imagined, nor yet hazel nor blue, nor indeed yellow nor red, nor purple nor white nor green, nor any other color in the heavens above, or in the earth beneath, or in the waters under the earth. In short, Pierre Bonbon not only plainly saw that His Majesty had no eyes whatsoever, but could discover no indications of their having existed at any previous period, for the space where eyes should naturally have been was, I am constrained to say, simply a dead level of flesh. It was not in the nature of the metaphysician to forbear making some inquiry into the sources of so strange a phenomenon, and the reply of His Majesty was at once prompt, dignified, and satisfactory. Eyes, my dear Bonbon, eyes, did you say? Ah, I perceive. The ridiculous prints, which are in circulation, have given you a false idea of my personal appearance. Eyes! True, eyes, Pierre Bonbon, are very well in their proper place. That, you would say, is the head? Right, the head of a worm. To you, likewise, these optics are indispensable, yet I will convince you that my vision is more penetrating than your own. There is a cat I see in the corner, a pretty cat. Look at her, observe her well. Now, Bonbon, do you behold the thoughts? The thoughts, I say, the idea, the reflections, which are being engendered in her pericranium. There it is now, you do not. She is thinking we admire the length of her tail and the profundity of her mind. She has just concluded that I am one of the most distinguished of ecclesiastics, that you are the most superficial of metaphysicians. Thus, you see, I am not altogether blind, but to one of my profession, the eyes you speak of would merely be an encumbrance, liable at any time to be put out by a toasting iron or a pitchfork. To you, I allow, these optical affairs are indispensable. Endeavor, Bonbon, to use them well. My vision is the soul. Hereupon the guest helped him to the wine upon the table, and pouring out a bumper for Bonbon, requested him to drink it without scruple and make himself perfectly at home. A clever book of yours. That of yours, Pierre, resumed His Majesty, tapping our friend knowingly upon the shoulder as the latter put down his glass after a thorough compliance with his visitor's injunction. A clever book, that of yours, upon my honor. It's a work after my own heart. Your arrangement of the matter, I think, however, might be improved, and many of your notions remind me of Aristotle. That philosopher was one of my most intimate acquaintances. I liked him as much for his terrible ill temper, for his happy knack of making a blunder. Blunder? There is only one solid truth in all that he has written, and for that I gave him the hint out of pure compassion for his absurdity. I suppose, Pierre Bonbon, you know very well to know what divine moral truth I am alluding. Cannot say that I... Indeed! Why, it was I who told Aristotle that by sneezing men expelled superfluous ideas through the proboscis. Which is undoubtedly the case, said the metaphysician, while he poured out himself for another bumper of Mosseau, and offered his snuff-box to the fingers of his visitor. There was Plato, too, continued His Majesty, modestly declining the snuff-box and the compliment it implied. There was Plato, too, for whom I at one time felt all the affection of a friend. You knew Plato, Bonbon. Ah, no, I beg 1,000 pardons. He met me in Athens one day, in the Parthenon, and told me that he was distressed for an idea. I bade him write down that... That is in a language I can't read. He said it is not a Latin language. He said that he would do so and went home while I stepped over to the pyramids. But my conscience smote me for having uttered a truth, even to aid a friend in hastening back to Athens. Athens. There's a town I grew up near that they pronounce it Athens, because Midwest. I arrived behind the philosopher's chair as he was giving the lambda a fillip with my finger. I turned it upside down. So the sentence now reads that, and as you perceive, that is, as you perceive, the fundamental doctrines in his metaphysics. Were you ever at Rome? Asked the restaurateur as he finished his second bottle of Mousseux and drew from the closet a larger supply of Chambertin. But once, Monsieur Bonbon, but once. There was a time, said the devil as if reciting some passage from a book, there was a time when occurred an anarchy of 5 years during which the Republic, bereft of all its officers, had no magistracy, besides the tribunes of the people, and these were not legally vested with any degree of executive power. At that time, Monsieur Bonbon, at that time only, I was in Rome, and I have no earthly acquaintance, consequently, with any of its philosophy. What do you think of Epicurus? What do I think of whom? Said the devil in astonishment. You surely cannot mean to find any fault with Epicurus. What do I think of Epicurus? Do you mean me, sir? I am Epicurus. I am the same philosopher who wrote each of the 300 treatises commemorated by Diogenes Laertes. That is a lie, said the metaphysician, for the wine had gotten a little too into his head. Very well, sir, very well indeed, sir, said His Majesty, apparently much flattered. That is a lie, repeated the restaurateur dogmatically. That's a lie. Well, have it your own way, said the devil pacifically, and Bonbon, having beaten His Majesty at an argument, though thought it was his duty to conclude a second bottle of Chamberlain. As I was saying, resumed the visitor, as I was observing a little while ago, there are some very outer notions in that book of yours, Monsieur Bonbon. What, for instance, do you think of by all that humbug about the soul? Pray, sir, what is the soul? The soul, replied the metaphysician, referring to his MS, is undoubtedly, no, sir. Indubitably, no, sir. Indisputably, no, sir. Incontrovertibly, no, sir. No, sir. And beyond all question, no, sir, the soul is no such thing. Here the philosopher, looking daggers, took occasion to make an end upon the spot of his third bottle of Chambertin. Then, pray, sir, what is it? That is neither here nor there, Monsieur Bonbon, replied His Majesty musingly. I have tasted, that is to say, I have known some very bad souls and some too pretty good ones. Here he smacked his lips, and having unconsciously let fall his hand upon the volume in his pocket, was seized with a violent fit of sneezing. He continued, there was the soul of Crichtonus, passable, Aristophanes, racy, Plato, exquisite, not your Plato, but Plato the comic poet. Your Plato would have turned the stomach of Cerberus. Then let me see, there was Novius and Andronicus and Platus and Terentius. There was Lucilius and Catullus and Naso and Quintius Flacius. Dear Quinty, as I called him when he sung a secular for my amusement, while I toasted him in pure good humor on a fork. But they want flavor, these Romans. One fat Greek is worth a dozen of them, and besides will keep, which cannot be said of a Quirite. Quirite? Let us taste your Saturnae. Bonbon had by this time made up his mind to the nil admirari, and endeavored to hand down the bottles in question. He was, however, conscious of a strange sound in the room like the wagging of a tail. Of this, although extremely indecent in His Majesty, the philosopher took no note, simply kicking the dog and requesting him to be quiet. The visitor continued. I found that Horace tasted very much like Aristotle. You know I'm fond of variety. Terentius I could not have told from Menander. Naso, to my astonishment, was Nicander in disguise. Virgilius had a strong twang of Theocritus. Martial put me much in mind of Archilochus, and Titus Livius was positively Polybius and none other. Here replied Bonbon, and His Majesty proceeded. But if I have a penchant, Monsieur Bonbon, if I have a penchant, it is for a philosopher. Yet let me tell you, sir, it is not every gentleman who knows how to choose a philosopher. Long ones are not good, and the best, if not carefully shelled, are apt to be a little rancid on account of the gall. Shelled? I mean, taken out of the carcass. What do you think of a physician? Don't mention them. Here his majesty retched violently. I have never tasted but one. That rascal Hippocrates smelt of asafoetida. Caught a wretched cold washing him in the Styx, and after all he gave me the cholera morbus. The wretch, ejaculated Bonbon. The abortion of a pillbox. And the philosopher dropped a tear. After all, continued the visitor, after all, if a gentleman wishes to live, he must have more talents than one or two, and with us a fat face is an evidence of diplomacy. How so? Why, we are sometimes exceedingly pushed for provisions. You must know that in a climate so sultry as mine, it is frequently impossible to keep a spirit alive for more than 2 or 3 hours, and after death, unless pickled immediately, and a pickled spirit is not good, they will smell. You understand, eh? Putrefaction is always to be apprehended when the souls are consigned to us in the usual way. Good God, how do you manage? Here the iron lamp commenced swinging with a redoubled violence, and the devil half started from his seat. However, with a slight sigh, he recovered his composure, merely saying to our hero in a low tone, I tell you what, Pierre Bonbon, we must have no more swearing. The host swallowed another bumper by way of denoting through comprehension and acquiescence, and the visitor continued. Why, there are several ways of managing. The most of us starve, some put up with the pickle, but for my part I purchase my spirit vivente corpore, in which case I find they keep very well. But the body, the body. The body, well, what of the body? Oh, I perceive. Why, sir, the body is not at all affected by the transaction. I have made innumerable purchases of the kind in my day, and the parties were never experienced in any inconvenience. There were Cain and Nimrod and Nero and Caligula and Dionysus and Pisistratus and 1,000 others who never knew what it was like to have a soul during the latter part of their lives. Yet, sir, these men adorned society. Why, there isn't A, now, whom you know very well as I. Is he not in possession of all his faculties, mental and corporeal? Who writes a keener epigram? Who reasons more wittily? Who? But stay, I have his agreement in my pocketbook. Thus saying, he produced a red leather wallet and took from it a number of papers. Upon some of these, Bonbon caught a glimpse of the letters Machi, Maza, Robesp, and the words Caligula, George, Elizabeth. His Majesty selected a narrow slip of parchment and from it read aloud the following words. In consideration of certain mental endowments, which it is necessary to specify, and in farther consideration of 1,000 louis d'or, I, being aged 1 year and 1 month, do hereby make over to the bearer of the agreement all my right title and appurtenance in the shadow called my soul. Signed. Here His Majesty repeated a name which I do not feel justified myself in indicating more unequivocally. A clever fellow that, resumed he, but like you, Monsieur Bonbon, he was mistaken about the soul. The soulless shadow, truly, the soulless shadow. Only think of a fricasseed shadow. Only think of a fricasseed shadow, exclaimed our hero, whose faculties were becoming much illuminated by the profundity of His Majesty's discourse. Only think of a fricasseed shadow. Now, damn. If I would have been such a nincompoop. My soul, Mr. Your soul, Monsieur Bonbon? Yes, sir, my soul is... What, sir? No shadow, dame. Did you mean to say? Yes, sir, my soul is... Humph. Yes, sir. Did not intend to assert. My soul is... particularly qualified for... What, sir? Stew. Ha! Souffle. Eh? Fricassee. Indeed. Rag out and fricundo. And see here, my good fellow, I'll let you have it. A bargain. Whoops, wrong voice. Oh well. Here the philosopher slapped His Majesty upon the back. Couldn't think of such a thing, said the latter calmly, at the same time rising from his seat. The metaphysician stared. I'm supplied at present, said His Majesty. Said the philosopher. Have no funds on hand. What? Besides, very unhandsome in me. Sir, to take advantage of your present disgusting and ungentlemanly situation. Here the visitor bowed and withdrew, in what manner could not precisely be ascertained, but in a well-concerted effort to discharge a bottle at the villain, the slender chain was severed that depended from the ceiling, and the metaphysician prostrated by the downfall of the lamp. Prostrated by the downfall of the lamp. Well, that was interesting. Yeah, he murdered by his own lamp trying to kill the devil. Can you imagine? Those hiccups. I'm going to go get some water. I will be right back. Oh, I'm sorry, Sir Doggo. Don't give me that look. I didn't mean to. Sleep well, TJ. And welcome in, Mopey, and welcome in, Dr. Frederick and Reeb. I don't remember if you were there at the beginning because my memory sucks, but sleep well, TJ. I think my favorite part of that was that the guy was like, no, this is how you will cook my soul. And then the devil was just like, nah, I don't want it. Oh, there is Latin in this. There is Latin in this. I will do my best. Just been chilling. That's what these are for. They're nice to just put in the background and do other things. I like reading stream. All right. This sounds interesting. 4 beasts in one. The homo camelopards. You know Latin? That's awesome. I'll do my best to pronounce it properly, but I doubt I will manage. Antiochus Epiphanes is very generally looked upon as the Gog of the prophet Ezekiel. This honor is, however, more properly attributable to Cambyses, the son of Cyrus. And indeed, the character of the Syrian monarch does by no means stand in need of any adventitious embellishment. His ascension to the throne, or rather his I can never pronounce this one. Usurpation of the sovereignty. 171 years before the coming of Christ, his attempt to plunder the temple of Diana at Ephesus, and his implacable hostility to the Jews, his pollution of the Holy of Holies, and his miserable death at Taba after a tumultuous reign of 11 years are circumstances of a prominent kind, and therefore more generally noted by the historians of his time than the impious, dastardly, cruel, silly, and whimsical adventures which make up the sum total of his private life and reputation. Let us suppose, gentle reader, that it is now the year of the world 3830. And let us imagine, for a few moments, at that most grotesque habitation of man, the remarkable city of Antioch. To be sure, there were, in Syria and other countries, 16 cities of that appellation, besides the one to which I more particularly allude. But ours is that which went by the name of Antiochia Epidaphne, from its vicinity to the little village of Daphne, where stood a temple to that divinity. It was built, although about this matter there is some dispute, by Seleucus Nicanor, the first king of the country after Alexander the Great, in memory of his father Antiochus, and it became immediately the residence of the Syrian monarchy. In the flourishing times of the Roman Empire, it was the ordinary station of the prefect of the eastern provinces, and many of the emperors of the Queen City, among whom may be mentioned especially Varus and Valens, spend here the greater part of their time. But I perceive we have arrived at the city itself. Let us ascend this battlement and throw our eyes upon the town and neighboring country. What broad and rapid river is that which forces its way with innumerable falls through the mountainous wilderness and finally through the wilderness of buildings? That is the Orontes, and it is the only water in sight with the exception of the Mediterranean, which stretches like a broad mirror about 12 miles off to the southward. Everyone has seen the Mediterranean, but let me tell you, there are few who have had a peek at Antioch. By few, I mean few who, like you and me, have had at the same time the advantages of a modern education. Therefore, cease to regard that sea and give your whole attention to the mass of houses that lie beneath us. You will remember now that it is the year of the world 3830. Were it later, for example, were it the year of our Lord 1845, we should be deprived of this extraordinary spectacle. In the 19th century, Antioch, that is to say, Antioch will be, in a lamentable state of decay. It will have been by that time totally destroyed at 3 different periods by 3 successive earthquakes. Indeed, to say the truth, what little of its former self may remain then will be found so desolate and ruinous a state that the patriarch shall have removed his residence to Damascus. This is well. I see you profit by my advice, and are making the most of your time in inspecting the premises, in satisfying your eyes with the memorials and things of fame that most renown this city. I beg pardon, I've forgotten that Shakespeare will not flourish for 1750 years to come. But does not the appearance of Epidaphne satisfy me in calling it grotesque? The layout of this is difficult to put into words, but I'll try my best to elaborate on, like, weird parts of it. It is well fortified, and in this respect is much indebted to nature as art. Very true. There are a prodigious number of stately palaces. There are. And the numerous palaces, sumptuous in magnificence, may bear comparison with the most lauded of antiquity. All this I must acknowledge. Still, there is an infinity of mud huts and abominable hovels. We cannot help perceiving abundance of filth in every kennel, and were it not for the overpowering fumes of idolatrous incense, I have no doubt we should find a more intolerable stench. Did you ever behold streets so insufferably narrow, or houses so miraculously tall? What a gloom their shadows cast upon the ground! It is well the swinging lamps in those endless colonnades are kept burning throughout the day. We should otherwise have the darkness of Egypt in the time of her desolation. It is certainly a strange place. What is the meaning of yonder singular building? See, it towers above all the others, and to the eastward lies of what I take to be the royal palace. That is the new temple of the sun, who is adorned in Syria under the title of Elagabalus. Hereafter a very notorious Roman Empire will institute this worship in Rome, and thence derive a cognomen, Heliogabalus. I dare say you would like to take this peep at the divinity of the temple. You need not look up at the heavens. His sonship is not there, at least not the sonship adored by the Syrians. That deity will be found in the interior of yonder building. He is worshipped under the figure of a large stone pillar terminating at the summit in a cone or pyramid, whereby is denoted fire. Hark, behold! Who can those ridiculous beings be, half naked with their face painted, shouting and gesticulating to the rabble? Some few are mountebanks. However, more particularly belong to the race of the philosophers. The greatest portion, however, those especially who belabor the populace with clubs, are the principal courtiers of the palace, executing, as in duty bound, some laudable comicality of the king's. But what have we here? Heavens, the town is swarming with wild beasts. How terrible a spectacle! How dangerous a peculiarity! Terrible, but, if you please, but not in the least degree dangerous. Each animal that you will take pains to observe is following very quietly in the wake of its master. Some few, to be sure, are led with a rope about the neck, but these are chiefly the lesser or timid species. The lion, the tiger, and the leopard are entirely without restraint. They have been trained without difficulty to their present profession, and attend upon their respective owner in the capacity of valet de chambre. It is true, there are occasions when nature asserts her violated dominance, but then the devouring of a man at arms or the throttling of a consecrated bull is a circumstance of too little moment to be more than hinted at in Epidaphne. But what extraordinary tumult do I hear? Surely this is a loud noise even for Antioch. It argues some commotion of unusual interest. Yes, undoubtedly, the king has ordered some novel spectacle, some gladiatorial exhibition at the Hippodrome, or perhaps the massacre of the Scythian prisoners, or the conflagration of his new palace, or the tearing down of a handsome temple, or indeed a bonfire of a few Jews. It was a different time. The uproar increases, shouts of laughter ascend the sky, the air becomes dissonant with wind instruments and horrible with the clamor of a million throats. Let us descend for the love of fun and see what is going on. This way, be careful. Here we are in the principal street, which is called the Street of Timarchus. The sea of people is coming this way, and we shall find difficulty in stemming the tide. They are pouring through the alley of Heraclides, which leads directly from the palace. Therefore, the king is most probably among the rioters. Yes, I hear the shouts of the herald proclaiming his approach in the pompous phraseology of the East. We shall have a glimpse of this person as he passes by the temple of the Ashima. Let us ensconce ourselves in the vestibule of the sanctuary. He will be here anon. In the meantime, let us survey this image. What is it? Oh, it is the god Ashima in proper person. You perceive, however, that he is neither a lamb, nor a goat, nor a satyr, neither has he much resemblance to the Pan of the Arcadians. Yet all these appearances have been given, I beg pardon, will be given, by the learned of future ages, to the Ashima of the Syrians. Put on your spectacles and tell me, what is it? Bless me, it's an ape. True, a baboon, but by no means the less a deity. His name is a derivation of the Greek simia. What great fools are antiquarians! But see yonder scampers a ragged little urchin. Where is he going? What is he bawling about? What does he say? Oh, he says the king is coming in triumph, that he is dressed in state, that he has just finished putting to death with his own hand 1,000 chained Israelitish prisoners. For this exploitation, the ragamuffin is lauding him to the skies. Hark, here comes a troop of a similar description. They have made a Latin hymn upon the valor of the king and are singing it as they go. Forgive me, I don't speak Latin. Mille? 1,000? You know what? Which may thus be paraphrased. 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. We with one warrior have slain 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. Sing 1,000 over again. There are no silent letters. So mille, 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 mille. Decolavimus anus homo, mille, 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 mille. Decolavimus, mille, mille, mille. Vivat qui, mille, mille, occidit. Tantum vini habet nemo, quantum sanguinis effudit. All right. 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. We with one warrior have slain 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000. Sing 1,000 over again. So-ho, let us sing, long life to our king, who knocked over 1,000 so fine. So-ho, let us roar. He's given us more, red gallons of gore, than all Syria can furnish wine. Do you hear the flourish of trumpets? Yes, the king is coming. See, the people are aghast with admiration and lift their eyes to the heavens in reverence. He comes. He is coming. There he is. Who? Where? The king? Do not behold him. Cannot say that I perceive him. Then you must be blind. Very possible. Still I see nothing but a tumultuous mob of idiots and madmen who are busy in prostrating themselves before a gigantic camel leopard and endeavoring to obtain a kiss from the animal's hooves. See, the beast has justly kicked one of the rabble over, and another, and another, and another. Indeed, I cannot help admiring the animal for the excellent use he is making of his feet. Rabble indeed. Why these are the noble and free citizens of Epidaphne. Beasts, you say, take care that you are not overheard. Do you not perceive that the animal has the visage of a man? Why, my dear, that camelopard is no other than Antiochus Epiphanes Antiochus the illustrious, king of Syria, and the most potent of all the autocrats of the East. It is true he is entitled at times Antiochus Epimanes, Antiochus the madman, but that is because all people have not the capacity to appreciate his merits. It is also certain that he is at present ensconced in the height of a beast and is doing his best to play the part of a camelopard. But this is done for the better sustaining his dignity as a king. Besides, the monarch is of gigantic stature, and the dress is therefore neither unbecoming nor overlarge. We may, however, presume he would not have adopted it but for some occasion of a special state. Such, you will allow, is the massacre of 1,000 Jews. With how superior a dignity the monarch perambulates on all fours. His tail, you perceive, is held aloft by his two principal concubines, Elene and Argale, and his whole appearance would be infinitely prepossessing were it not for the protuberance of his eyes, which will certainly start out of his head, and the queer color of his face, which has become nondescript from the quantity of wine he has swallowed. Let us follow him to the hippodrome, whither he is proceeding, and listen to the song of triumph with which he is commencing. Say, who is King but Epiphanes? Say, do you know? Who is king but Epiphanes? Bravo, bravo. There is none but Epiphanes. No, there is none. So tear down the temples, and put out the sun. Well and strenuously sung, the populace are hailing him prince of poets, as well as glory of the East, delight of the universe, and most remarkable of camelopards. They have encored his effusion, and do you hear? He is singing it all over again. When he arrives at the hippodrome, he will be crowned with the poetic wreath in anticipation of his victory at the approaching Olympics. But, good Jupiter, what is the matter in the crowd behind us? Behind us, did you say? Oh, I perceive. My friend, it is well that you spoke in time. Let us get into a place of safety as soon as possible. Here, let us conceal ourselves in the arch of this aqueduct, and I will inform you presently of the origin of the commotion. It has turned out as I have been anticipating. The singular appearance of the camel leopard with the head of a man has, it seems, given offense to the notions of propriety entertained, in general, by the wild animals domesticated in the city. A mutiny has been the result, and as is usual upon such occasions, all human effort will be of no avail in quelling the mob. Excuse me. Several of the Syrians have already been devoured, but the general voice of the four-footed patriot seems to be for eating up the camel leopard. The Prince of Poets, therefore, is upon his hinder legs and running for his life. His courtiers have left him in the lurch, and his concubines have followed so excellent an example. Delight of the universe, thou art in a sad predicament. Glory of the East, thou art in danger of mastication. Therefore never regard so piteously thy tail, as it will undoubtedly be draggled in the mud, and for this there is no help. Look not behind thee, then, at its unavoidable degradation, but take courage, ply thy legs with vigor, and scud for the hippodrome. Remember thou art Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus the illustrious, also Prince of Poets, glory of the East, delight of the universe, and most remarkable of camel leopards. Heavens, what a power of speed thou art displaying! What a capacity for leg bail thou art developing! Run, Prince! Bravo, Epiphanes! Well done, camel leopard! Glorious Antiochus, he runs, he leaps, he flies! Like an arrow from a catapult, he approaches the hippodrome. He leaps, he shrieks, he is there. This is well, for hadst thou, glory of the East, been a half-second longer in reaching the gates of the amphitheater, there is not a bear's cub in Epidaphne that would not have had a nibble at thy carcass. Let us be off. Let us take our departure. For we shall find our delicate modern ears unable to endure the vast uproar that is about to commence in celebration of the king's escape. Listen, it has already commenced. See, the whole town is topsy-turvy. Surely this is the most populous city of the East. What a wilderness of people! What a jumble of all ranks and ages! What a multiplicity of sects and nations! What a variety of costumes! What a babble of languages! What a screaming of beasts! What a tinkling of instruments! What a parcel of philosophers! Come, let us be off. Stay a moment, I see a vast hubbub in the hippodrome. What is the meaning of it, I beseech you? That? Oh, nothing. the noble and free citizens of Epidaphne being, as they declare, well satisfied of the faith, valor, wisdom, and divinity of their king, and having moreover been eyewitness to his late superhuman agility, do think it no more than their duty to invest his brows, in addition to the poetic crown, with the wreath of victory in the foot race, a wreath which it is evident he must obtain at the celebration of the next Olympiad, and which, therefore, they now give him in advance. Look at this incredible coward and how quickly he flies. All right, I think this will be our last story. The one after it is... I mean, it's not terrible. Whoop. Actually, the one after that will likely take us all stream. So let's go ahead. Let's do 2 more. Might be a little more than 2 hours, but I think it'll be okay. And then our next reading will be 1 story, all 2 last stories. Our next reading session, I guess, will be all 1 story. Might hit lionizing after. Oh, why is my phone going crazy? Hold up. Sorry, give me just a moment. There we go. Try not to be on my phone during stream, but that was a bit unavoidable. Sorry. More water. Welcome in, Crooked Gamer. Just reading. You're impressed you managed that verse. Worked both well in both English and Latin. It wasn't bad for someone who doesn't speak Latin. I appreciate it. Oh, too much water, I guess. All right. I believe that this is... Let me... Okay, I'm not actually sure how this should be read. It makes mention of a ship. Okay. But everything is in caps, so you understood all the words. Yay! Thank you. Okay, there's a note at the end. So it is the MS, not the Ms. MS, found in a bottle. Of my country and of my family I have little to say. Ill usage and length of years has driven me from the one and estranged me from the other. Hereditary wealth afforded me an education of no common order, and a contemplative turn of mind enabled me to methodize the stores which early study very diligently garnered up. Beyond all things, the work of the German moralists gave me great delight, not from any ill-advised admiration of their eloquent madness, but from the ease with which my habits of rigid thought enabled me to detect their falsities. I have often been reproached with the aridity of my genius. A deficiency of imagination has been imputed to me as a crime, and the Pyrrhonism of my opinion has at all times rendered me notorious. Indeed, a strong relish for physical philosophy has, I fear, tinctured my mind with a very common error of this age. I mean the habit of referring occurrences, even the least susceptible of such reference, to the principles of that science. Upon the whole, no person could be less liable than myself to be led away from the severe precincts of truth by the ignis fatui of superstition. I have thought proper to premise thus much, lest the incredible tale I have to tell should be considered rather the raving of a crude imagination than the positive experience of a mind to which the reveries of fancy have been sent a dead letter and a nullity. After many years spent in foreign travels, I sailed in the year 18 blank from the port of Batavia in the rich and populous island of Java on a voyage to the archipelago of the Sunda Islands. I went as passenger, having no other inducement than a kind of nervous restlessness which has haunted me as a fiend. Our vessel was a beautiful ship of about 400 tons, copper-fastened and built at Bombay of Malabar teak. She was freighted with cotton wool and oil from the Lachadive Islands, We also had on board Quar Jaggery, ghee, coconuts, and a few cases of opium. The stowage was clumsily done and the vessel consequently crank. We got underway with a mere breath of wind and for many days stood along the eastern coast of Java without any other incidents to beguile the monotony of our course than the occasional meeting with some of the small grabs of the archipelago to which we were bound. One evening, leaning over the taffrail, I observed a very singular isolated cloud to the northwest. NW. I'm just going to read out the directions. It was remarkable, as well for its color, as from its being the first we had seen since our departure from Batavia. I watched it attentively until sunset, when it spread all at once to the eastward and westward, girding the horizon with a narrow strip of vapor and looking like a long line of low beach. My notice was soon after attracted by the dusky red appearance of the moon and the peculiar character of the sea. The latter was undergoing a rapid change, and the water seemed more than usually transparent. Although I could distinctly see the bottom, yet heaving the lead, I found the ship in 15 fathoms. The air now became intolerably hot and was loaded with spiral exhalations similar to those arising from heated iron. As night came on, every breath of wind died away, and more entire calm it is impossible to conceive. The candle of a flame was burned upon the poop without the least perceptible motion, and a long hair held between the finger and thumb hung without the possibility of detecting a vibration. However, as the captain said he could perceive no indication of danger, and as we were drifting in bodily to shore, he ordered the sails to be furrowed and the anchor let go. No watch was set, and the crew, consisting principally of the Malays, stretched themselves deliberately upon deck. I went below, not without a full presentiment of evil. Indeed, every appearance warranted me into apprehending a simoon. I told the captain my fears, but he paid no attention to what I said, and left me without deigning to give a reply. My uneasiness, however, prevented me from sleeping, and about midnight I went upon deck. As I placed my foot upon the upper step of the companion ladder, I was startled by a loud humming noise, like that occasioned by the rapid evolution of a mill wheel, and before I could ascertain its meaning, I found the ship quivering to its center. In the next instant, a wilderness of foam hurled us upon our beam ends, and rushing over us fore and aft, swept the entire decks from stem to stern. The extreme fury of the blast proved, in a great measure, the salvation of the ship. Although completely waterlogged, yet, as her masts had gone by the board, she rose, after a minute, heavily from the sea, and staggering a while beneath the immense pressure of the tempest I finally righted. By what miracle I escaped destruction it is impossible to say. Stunned by the shock of the water, I found myself, upon recovery, jammed between the stern post and the rudder. With great difficulty I regained my feet, and looking dizzily around, was at first struck with the idea of our being among breakers. So terrific beyond the wildest imagination was the whirlpool of mountainous and foaming ocean within which we were engulfed. After a while I heard the voice of an old Swede who had shipped with us at the moment of our leaving port. I hallooed to him with all my strength, and presently he came reeling aft. We soon discovered that we were the sole survivors of the accident. All on deck, with the exception of ourselves, had been swept overboard. The captain and mates must have perished as they slept, for their cabins were deluged with water. Without assistance, we could do little for this. We could expect to do little for the security of our ship, and our exertions were at first paralyzed by the momentary expectation of going down. Our cable had, of course, parted like pack thread at the first breath of the hurricane, or we would have been instantaneously overwhelmed. We scudded with frightful velocity before the sea, and the water made clear breaches over us. The framework of our stern was shattered excessively, and in almost every respect we had received considerable injury, but to our extreme joy we found the pumps unchoked, and that we had made no great shifting of our ballast. The main fury of the blast had already blown over, and we apprehended little danger from the violence of the wind, but we looked forward to its total cessation with dismay, well believing that, in our shattered condition, we should inevitably perish in the tremendous swell which would ensue. But this very just apprehension seemed by no means likely to be soon verified. For 5 entire days and nights, during which our only subsistence was a small quantity of jaggery, procured with great difficulty from the forecastle, the hulk flew at a rate defying computation, before rapidly succeeding flaws of wind which, without equaling the first violence of the simoon, were still more terrific than any tempest I had encountered before. Our course for the first 4 days with trifling variations, south, east, and by south, and we must have run down the coast of New Holland. On the 5th day the cold became extreme, although the wind had hauled round a point more to the northward. The sun arose with a sickly yellow luster and clambered a few degrees above the horizon, emitting no device of light. There were no clouds apparent, yet the wind was upon the increase, and blew with a fitful and unsteady fury. About noon, as nearly as we could guess, our attention was again arrested by the appearance of the sun. It gave out no light, properly so called, but a dull and sullen glow without reflection, as if all its rays were polarized. Just before sinking within the turgid sea, its central fire suddenly went out, as if hurriedly extinguished by some unaccountable power. It was a dim, silver-like rim alone, as it rushed down into the unfathomable ocean. We waited in vain for the arrival of the 6th day. That day to me has not arrived. To the Swede, never did arrive. Thenceforward we were enshrouded in patchy darkness, so that we could not have seen an object at 20 paces from the ship. Eternal night continued to envelop us all, unrelieved by the phosphoric sea brilliancy to which we had been accustomed to in the tropics. We observed, too, that although the tempest continued to rage with unabated violence, there was no longer to be discovered the usual appearance of surf or foam which had hitherto attended us. All around were horror and thick gloom, and a black sweltering desert of ebony. Superstitious terror crept in by degrees into the spirit of the old Swede, and my own soul was wrapped in silent wonder. We neglected all care of the ship, as worse than useless, and securing ourselves as well as possible to the stump of the mizzenmast, looked out bitterly into the world of ocean. We had no means of calculating time, nor could we form any guess of our situation. We were, however, well aware of having made farther to the southward than any previous navigators, and felt great amazement at not meeting with the usual impediments of ice. In the meantime, every moment threatened to be our last. Every mountainous billow hurried to overwhelm us. The swell surpassed anything I had imagined possible, and that we were not instantly buried is a miracle. My companion spoke of the lightness of our cargo and reminded me of the excellent qualities of our ship, but I could not help feeling the utter hopelessness of hope itself, and prepared myself gloomily for that death which I thought nothing could defer beyond an hour, as, with every knot of way the ship made, the swelling of the black stupendous seas became more dismally appalling. At times we gasped for breath at an elevation beyond the albatross. At times became dizzy with the velocity of our descent into some watery hell where the air grew stagnant, and no sound disturbed the slumberers of the kraken. We were at bottom of one of these abysses when a quick scream from my companion broke fearfully upon the night. "See, see!" cried he, shrieking in my ears. "Almighty God, see, see!" As he spoke, I became aware of a dull, sullen glare of red light which streamed down the sides of the vast chasm. Oh no. My phone is dying. Vast chasm where we lay, and threw a fitful brilliancy upon our deck. Casting my eyes upward, I beheld a spectacle which froze the currents of my blood. At a terrific height directly above us, and upon the very verge of the precipitous descent, hovered a gigantic ship of perhaps 4,000 tons. Although upreared upon the summit of a wave no more than 100 times her altitude, her apparent size still exceeded that of any ship of the line or East Indiaman in existence. Her huge hull was of a deep, dingy black, unrelieved by any of the contemporary carvings of a ship. A single row of brass cannons protruded from her open ports, and dashed from their polished surfaces the fires of innumerable battle lanterns, which swung to and fro about her riggings. But what mainly inspired us with horror and astonishment was that she bore up under the press of a sail in the very teeth of that supernatural sea and of that ungovernable hurricane. When we first discovered her, her bows were alone to be seen as she rose slowly from the dim and horrible gulf beyond her. For a moment of intense terror, she paused upon the giddy pinnacle, as if in contemplation of her own sublimity, then trembled and tottered, and came down. At this instant, I know not what self-possession came over my spirit. Staggering as far aft as I could, I awaited fearlessly the ruin that was to overwhelm. Our own vessel was at length ceasing from her struggles and sinking with her head to the sea. The shock of that descending mass struck her consequently in that portion of her frame which was already under water, and the inevitable result was to hurl me, with irresistible violence, upon the rigging of the stranger. As I fell, the ship hove in stays and went out, and to the confusion ensuing, I attributed my escape from the notice of the crew. With little difficulty, I made my way unperceived to the main hatchway, which was partially open, and soon found an opportunity in secreting myself in the hold. Why I did so I can hardly tell. An indefinite sense of awe, which at first sight of the navigator's ship had taken hold of my mind, was perhaps the principle of my concealment. I was unwilling to trust myself with a race of people who had offered, to the cursory glance I had taken, so many points of vague novelty, doubt, and apprehension. I therefore thought proper to contrive a hiding place in the hold. This I did by removing a small portion of the shifting boards, in such a manner as to afford me a convenient retreat between the huge timbers of the ship. I had scarcely completed my work when a footstep in the hold forced me to make use of it. A man passed by my place of concealment with a feeble and unsteady gait. I could not see his face, but I had an opportunity of observing his general appearance. There was about it an evidence of great age and infirmity. His knees tottered beneath the load of years, and his entire frame quivered beneath the burden. He muttered to himself in a low, broken tone some words of a language I could not understand, and groped in a corner among a pile of singular-looking instruments and decayed charts of navigation. His manner was a wild mixture of the peevishness of second childhood and the solemn dignity of a god. He at length went on deck, and I saw him no more. A feeling for which I have no name has taken possession of my soul. A sensation will admit of no analysis to the lessons of a bygone time are inadequate, and for which I fear futurity itself will offer me no key. To a mind constituted like my own, the latter consideration is an evil. I know that I shall never, be satisfied with regard to the nature of my conceptions. Yet it is not wonderful that these conceptions are indefinite, since they have their origin in sources so utterly novel. A new sense, a new entity, is added to my soul. It is long since I first trod the deck of this terrible ship, and the rays of my destiny are, I think, gathering to a focus. Incomprehensible men, wrapped up in meditations of a kind which I cannot divine, they pass me by unnoticed. Concealment is utter folly on my part, for the people will not see. It was but just now that I passed before the eyes of the mate. It was no long while ago that I ventured into the captain's own private cabin, and took thence the materials with which I write, and have written. I shall from time to time continue this journey. It is true that I may not find an opportunity of transmitting it into the world, but I will not fail to make the endeavor. At the last moment I will enclose the message in a bottle and cast it within the sea. An incident has occurred which has given me new room for meditation. Are such the things of the operation of ungoverned chance? I had ventured upon deck and thrown myself down without attracting any notice, among a pile of rattling stuff and old sails in the bottom of the yawl. While musing upon the singularity of my fate, I unwittingly daubed a tar-brush with the edges of a neatly folding studding sail, which lay near me on a barrel. The studding sail is now bent upon the ship, and the thoughtless touches of the brushes spread out into the word Discovery. I have made many observations lately upon the structure of the vessel. Although well armed, she is not, I think, a ship of war. Her rigging, build, and general equipment all negative a supposition of this kind. What she is not, I can easily perceive. What she is, I fear, it is impossible to say. I know not how it is, but in scrutinizing her strange model and singular cast of spars, her huge size and overgrown suits of canvas, her severely simple bow and antiquated stern, there will occasionally flash across my mind a sensation of familiar things, and there is always mixed up with the indistinct shadows of recollection an uncountable memory of old foreign chronicles and ages long ago. I have been looking at the timbers of the ship. She is built of a material to which I am a stranger. There is a peculiar character about the wood which strikes me as rendering it unfit for the purpose to which it has been applied. I mean its extreme porousness. Considered independently of the worm-eaten condition which is a consequence of navigation in these seas, and apart from the rottenness attendant upon age, it will appear perhaps an observation somewhat over-curious, but this wood would have any characteristic of Spanish oak, if Spanish oak were distended by unnatural means. If reading the above sentence, a curious apothegm of an old weather-beaten Dutch navigator comes fully upon my recollection. It is as sure, he was wont to say when any doubt was entertained of his veracity. It is as sure there is sea, where the ship itself will grow in bulk like the living body of the seaman. About an hour ago, I made bold to thrust myself among a group of the crew. They paid me no manner of attention, and although I stood in the very midst of them, all seemed utterly unconscious of my presence. Like the one I had at first seen in the hold, they all bore about them the marks of a hoary old age. Their knees trembled with infirmity, their shoulders were bent double and with decrepitude, their shriveled skins rattled in the wind, their voices were low, tremulous, and broken, their eyes glistened with the rheum of years, and their gray hair streamed terribly in the tempest. Around them, on every part of the deck, lay scattered mathematical instruments of the most quaint and obsolete construction. I mentioned some time ago the bending of a studding sail. From that period, the ship, being thrown dead off the wind, had continued her terrific course due south. With every rag of canvas packed upon her, from her trucks to her lower studding sail booms, and rolling every moment her topgallant yard arms into the most appalling hell of water which it can enter into the mind of man to imagine. I have just left the deck, where I find it impossible to maintain a footing, although the crew seem to experience little inconvenience. It appears to me a miracle of miracles that our enormous bulk is not swallowed up at once and forever. We are surely doomed to hover continually upon the brink of eternity, without taking a final plunge into the abyss. From billows 1,000 times more stupendous than any I have ever seen, we glide away with the facility of the arrowy seagull, and the colossal waters rear their heads above us like demons of the deep, but like demons confined to simple threats and forbidden to destroy. I am led to attribute these frequent escapes to the only natural cause which I can account for such effect. I must suppose the ship to be within the influence of some strong current or impetuous undertow. I have seen the captain face to face and in his own cabin, but as I expected, he paid me no attention. Although in his appearance there is, to a casual observer, nothing which might bespeak him as more or less of a man, still a feeling of irrepressible reverence and awe mingled with the sensation of wonder with which I regarded him. In stature, he is nearly my own height, that is, about 5'8". He is of a well-knit and compact frame of body, neither robust nor remarkable otherwise, but it is the singularity of the expression which reigns upon the face. It is the intense, the wonderful, the thrilling evidence of old age, so utter, so extreme, which incites within my spirit a sentiment ineffable. His forehead, although little wrinkled, seems to bear upon it the stamp of a myriad of years. His gray hairs are records of the past, and his grayer eyes are sibyls of the future. The cabin floor was thickly strewn with strange iron-clasped folios, and mouldering instruments of science, and obsolete long-forgotten charts. His head was bowed down upon his hands, and he pored with a fiery, unquiet eye over a paper which I took to be a commission, and which, at all events, bore the signature of a monarch. He muttered to himself, as did the first seaman who I first saw in the hold, some low, peevish syllables of a foreign tongue, and although the speaker was close at my elbow, his voice seemed to reach my ears from the distance of a mile. The ship and all in it are imbued with the spirits of eld. The crew glide to and fro like the ghosts of buried centuries. Their eyes have an eager and uneasy meaning, and when their fingers fall athwart my path in the wild glare of the battle lanterns, I feel as though I have never felt before, although I have been all my life a dealer in antiquities and have imbibed the shadows of fallen columns at Baalbek and Tadmor and Persepolis, until my very soul has become a ruin. When I look around me, I feel ashamed of my former apprehensions. If I trembled at the blast which has hitherto attended us, shall I not stand aghast at a warring of wind and ocean, to convey any idea of which the words tornado and simoon are trivial and ineffective? All in the immediate vicinity of the ship is the blackness of eternal night, and a chaos of foamless water. But about a league on either side of us may be seen, indistinctly and at intervals, stupendous ramparts of ice towering away into the desolate sky, and looking like the walls of the universe. As I imagined, the ship proves to be in a current, if that appellation can properly be given to a tide which, howling and shrieking by the white ice, thunders on to the southward with a velocity of like the headlong dashing of a cataract. To conceive the horror of my sensation is, I presume, utterly impossible, Yet curiosity to penetrate the mysteries of these awful regions predominates even over my despair, and will reconcile me to the most hideous aspects of death. It is evident that we are hurrying onwards to some exciting knowledge, some never-to-be imparted secret whose attainment is destruction. Perhaps this current leads us to the southern pole itself. It must be confessed that a supposition apparently so wild has every probability in its favor. The crew pace the deck with unquiet and tremulous step, but there is upon their countenances an expression more of the eagerness of hope than the apathy of despair. In the meantime, the wind is still in our poop, and as we carry a crowd of canvas, the ship is at times lifted bodily out from the sea. Oh, horror upon horror! The ice opens suddenly to the right and to the left, and we are whirling dizzily in immense concentric circles round and round the borders of a gigantic amphitheater, the summits of whose walls is lost in the darkness and the distance. But little time will be left to me to ponder upon my destiny. The circles grow rapidly small. We are plunging madly within the grasp of the whirlpool, and amid a roaring, a bellowing, and thundering of ocean and the tempest, the ship is quivering, oh God, and going down. Note: the MS Found in a Bottle was originally published in 1831, and it was not until many years afterward that I became acquainted with the maps of Mercator, in which the ocean is represented as rushing by four mouths into the northern polar gulf, to be absorbed into the bowels of the earth, the pole itself being represented by black rock towering to a prodigious height. I actually don't think I have another one in me. That might have been our last. We'll follow up with the assignation, and I will hopefully be a little more rested to do our whole... That's only 50 pages. We might be able to do all 50 pages next time. Did you miss the sudden exclamation? Yes, you did. We had it mentioned 2 times in the very first story that we read. And it was pretty great. You also missed the hiccups. Hi, Writing Sonic. I'm sorry that you came so late. Reading is surprisingly taxing, especially when you're reading Poe, who likes to use a whole bunch of words that I have to figure out from context clues. Thank you, Dr. Frederick. Have a wonderful night. Thank you, Abaddon, Reeb, Crooked Gamer for stopping in, Mopey. I know TJ already went to bed. I hope you all have a lovely night and a wonderful start to the week. Thank you, Reeb, and thank you, Dr. Frederick. I hope you have a wonderful start to the week, that this will get your Monday going all good. Yeah, that is true. A good start to the week, I hope. A nice, relaxing Sunday before the grind of the week starts. All right, I'm just going to end it here for, VOD purposes, basically. It helps you pretend you're cultured. You are cultured. It was a minimal ejaculation stream. It was. Welcome in, Charted Darby. or good to see you. All right, everybody, have a wonderful night. We will continue this maybe next Sunday. Depends on if we're doing a karaoke instead. We're pretty close. So have a good night. I'll see you all later.